I was walking on the beach at night when I saw a strange figure in the distance. As I got closer, I realized that it was a ghost. I had been feeling stressed lately, and the beach was my favorite place to come to relax and clear my head. The moon was full and bright, casting a silvery glow over the deserted beach. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. As I walked, I noticed a tall, slender figure standing perfectly still, facing the ocean. I stopped and watched the figure for a moment. It was too dark to see clearly, but I could tell that it was a woman. Curiosity getting the better of me, I started walking towards the figure. As I got closer, I could see that she was wearing a long white dress that fluttered in the breeze. Her hair was long and flowing, and her face was pale and ethereal. I stopped a few feet away from the woman. She just stood there, staring at the ocean. I felt a chill running down my spine. Something about the woman was unsettling. "Hello?" I called out. The woman didn't respond. I took a step closer. "Are you okay?" I asked. Still no response. I took another step closer. I was now close enough to see the woman's face in detail. Her eyes were empty and lifeless. Her skin was cold and clammy to the touch. I realized with a jolt of terror that I was standing in front of a ghost. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. The ghost turned to face me, and I saw that her eyes were now glowing red. I screamed and turned to run. I could hear the ghost's footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer. I ran until my lungs burned. I could feel the ghost's icy breath on my neck. I was about to give up when I saw a light in the distance. It was a small beach house. I ran towards it, banging on the door. "Help!" I cried. "Help!" The door opened and an old woman appeared. "What's wrong, dear?" the old woman asked. "There's a ghost after me," I cried. The old woman nodded knowingly. "Come inside," she said. I ran into the house, and the old woman closed the door behind me. "It can't follow you in here," the old woman said. I collapsed on the couch, my chest heaving. I looked over at the old woman, who was sitting in a rocking chair. "What's going on?" I asked. "Who was that ghost?" The old woman sighed. "That was the ghost of the drowned woman," she said. "The drowned woman?" I asked. "Yes," the old woman said. "Many years ago, a young woman drowned on this beach. She was trying to save her lover, who had been caught in a rip current. But the current was too strong, and they both drowned." "Is that why she's haunting the beach?" I asked. "Yes," the old woman said. "She's lost and alone. She's searching for her lover, but he's never coming back." I shivered. I couldn't imagine being lost and alone for all eternity. "Is there anything I can do to help her?" I asked. The old woman shook her head. "No," she said. "There's nothing you can do. She's trapped here, and she'll never be able to move on." I sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the drowned woman. I felt a deep sadness for her. "Thank you for helping me," I said to the old woman. "You're welcome," the old woman said. "Now, why don't you get some rest? You've had a long night." I nodded and stood up. I followed the old woman to a bedroom and collapsed on the bed. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the drowned woman and her tragic story. The next morning, I woke up early and went back to the beach. I walked to the spot where I had seen the ghost the night before. I looked out at the ocean, but there was no sign of the ghost. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I made a wish that the drowned woman would finally find peace.
Next story.
I was digging for sand crabs on the beach one day when I hit something hard. I dug a little more carefully and found a large piece of bone. My heart started to race. I had a bad feeling about this. I dug a little more and found another piece of bone, and then another. I realized that I had discovered a buried body. I stopped digging and called the police. The police arrived a short time later and began to excavate the body. It was a young woman, and she had been buried for several months. She was wearing a bikini, and her hands were tied behind her back. The police determined that the woman had been strangled to death. They also found a piece of rope at the scene, which they believed was used to strangle her. The police launched an investigation, but they had no leads. The woman was unidentified, and there were no witnesses to her murder. The case went cold, but I couldn't forget about it. I kept thinking about the young woman and her tragic death. I felt compelled to find her killer. I started my own investigation. I interviewed people who lived and worked near the beach. I also searched the area for any clues. One day I was talking to a fisherman who told me about a strange man he had seen on the beach a few months ago. The man was acting suspiciously, and he seemed to be looking for something. I decided to check out the area where the fisherman had seen the strange man. I searched for hours, but I didn't find anything. Just as I was about to give up, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a small piece of rope. I picked up the rope and examined it closely. It was the same type of rope that had been used to strangle the young woman. My heart started to race. I knew that I had finally found a lead. I took the rope to the police, and they were able to match it to the rope that had been found at the crime scene. The police arrested the strange man who had been seen on the beach. The man confessed to killing the young woman. He said that he had met her at the beach, and they had gone for a walk. He then strangled her and buried her body. The police were relieved to have finally solved the case. They thanked me for my help, and I was hailed as a hero. I was glad that I had been able to help solve the case, but I was still haunted by the memory of the young woman. I knew that I would never forget her. I continued to visit the beach, but I never dug for sand crabs again. I would sit on the sand and think about the young woman. I would wonder what her life would have been like if she hadn't been murdered. One day, I was sitting on the beach when I saw a young girl playing in the sand. She was wearing a bikini, and her hair was blowing in the wind. My heart started to race. The young girl looked just like the young woman who had been murdered.
Next story.
My family and I were on vacation at the beach. We were staying in a small beach house, just a short walk from the sand. My wife, Scarlett, and I were sitting on the porch, enjoying the sunset, while our two children, Emily and Michael, were playing in the sand. Emily was 5 years old, and Michael was 7. They were both bright and energetic kids, and they loved playing at the beach. After a while, Scarlett and I got up and went down to the sand to join them. We built sandcastles and played tag. It was a perfect evening. But then something went wrong. Emily was playing in the water when she suddenly disappeared. We searched everywhere for her, but she was nowhere to be found. We called the police, and they began a search for Emily. They searched the beach, the water, and the surrounding area, but they couldn't find her. Scarlett and I were devastated. We didn't know what to do. We just sat on the beach and waited for news. The next day, the police continued their search. They brought in helicopters and boats, but they still couldn't find Emily. Scarlett and I were starting to lose hope. We were beginning to think that we would never see our daughter again. But then, on the third day, the police got a break. They received a tip from a local fisherman who said that he had seen a strange man on the beach the night Emily disappeared. The police interviewed the fisherman, and he gave them a description of the man. They then released the description to the public. A few hours later, the police received a call from a woman who said that she had seen the man in the park. The police went to the park and found the man. The man was arrested and brought in for questioning. He eventually confessed to kidnapping Emily. He said that he had taken her to his house and kept her there for 3 days. The police went to the man's house and rescued Emily. She was unharmed, but she was very shaken up. Scarlett and I were so relieved to have our daughter back. We hugged her tightly and told her how much we loved her. The man who kidnapped Emily was charged with kidnapping and child endangerment. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Scarlett and I decided to end our vacation early. We didn't want to stay at the beach any longer. It reminded us too much of what had happened. We drove home, and Scarlett fell asleep on my shoulder. I held her hand tightly and thought about how lucky I was to have my family back. It's been a year since Emily was kidnapped. She's still recovering from the experience, but she's getting better. We're all still traumatized by what happened, but we're trying to move on. We're grateful that Emily is safe, and we're determined to make the most of every day.
As a huge support, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe share your thought or any experience before going to watch another video. Thank you so much. Have a good day.